3 years ago, I walked out of that office with my files thrown across the desk, my former boss's mocking laughter still echoing in my ears. Today, I step into a different high-rise, where those who destroyed my career will soon tremble, because now I'm the strategic advisor to their biggest rival. They thought they'd buried me. They were wrong. I didn't just survive, I evolved into something they never saw coming. And this morning, as I prepare for the meeting that will determine their fate, I can't help but smile at the beautiful irony of it all. My name is Emily Carter. And 3 years ago, I was one of the brightest financial strategy specialists at Grantwell & Co. At 32, I'd already built a reputation for turning around impossible accounts and finding opportunities where others saw dead ends. I had the corner office on the 14th floor, a team of 5 analysts who respected me, and what I thought was a promising trajectory toward partnership. How naive I was. Grantwell & Co. was one of those consulting firms that looked pristine from the outside. All glass walls, imported marble, and Fortune 500 clients. But inside, it was a snake pit where ambition wasn't just encouraged, it was weaponized. The real currency wasn't talent or hard work, it was how well you played the political game. And I, stupidly, thought excellence would be enough. Mark Halston changed that delusion. He'd been promoted to senior director 6 months before everything went to hell. And from day one, he saw me as a threat. Mark was the kind of man who wore his Harvard MBA like armor and treated every meeting like a battlefield. He had this way of smiling that never reached his eyes, especially when he was about to destroy someone. I should have seen the signs, the way he'd interrupt me mid-presentation, how he'd schedule urgent meetings that conflicted with my client calls. The subtle undermining disguised as mentorship. The truth was simple, I was too good at my job. And I didn't kiss his ring. While others laughed at his mediocre golf jokes and agreed with his half-baked strategies, I had the audacity to present better ideas. Data-driven, client-focused ideas that made his look like the corporate fluff they were. My biggest mistake wasn't being talented, it was refusing to dim my light to make him shine brighter. The campaign against me started small. First, he reassigned my best analyst to his pet project. Then, he began questioning my methods in front of clients, planting seeds of doubt with practiced precision. Emily's approach is certainly creative, he'd say, with just enough pause to make creative sound like reckless. Though I wonder if we should consider a more traditional strategy. Traditional meant his strategy. Of course. The final act came on a Thursday afternoon in March. I'd just landed the Sentinel Industries account, a $50 million contract that should have guaranteed my promotion to senior manager. I'd worked 18-hour days for 2 months, crafting a revolutionary restructuring plan that would save them millions. The client loved it. The CEO had personally called to commend my work. But when I walked into the conference room for what I thought was a celebration, I found Mark sitting behind his desk with HR flanking him like executioners. My files were already boxed. My company laptop sat closed on the table like evidence at a trial. Performance issues, he said, sliding a termination letter across the mahogany table. Inability to collaborate with team leadership, resistance to feedback, insubordination. Each word was carefully chosen, legally bulletproof, and completely fabricated. I remember how my hands didn't shake as I read the letter, how my voice stayed steady when I asked for specific examples, how Mark's smile widened when he realized I wasn't going to cry or beg. The decision's been made, Emily. Security will escort you out. The worst part wasn't the termination, it was the theatrical cruelty of it. He'd called a full team meeting for that afternoon, knowing I'd have to walk past the conference room's glass walls carrying my banker's box like a criminal. He'd timed it perfectly so everyone would see. As I passed, I caught his reflection in the glass, watching me with satisfaction. You know, he called out as I reached the elevator, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. You were never quite good enough to play at this level anyway. Some people just aren't built for the big leagues. The elevator doors closed on the sound of nervous laughter from my former colleagues, people who knew exactly what had happened but were too afraid to be next. In that moment, Standing in that metal box descending 14 floors, I made a promise to myself. Mark Halston thought he'd ended my career. He had no idea he'd just started a war. The first week after Grantwell, I couldn't get out of bed. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. like clockwork. My body still programmed for the commute that no longer existed. Then reality would crash down. No office to go to, no emails to check, no meetings to prepare for. Just silence and the weight of failure pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. My savings would last maybe 3 months if I was careful. The severance package was insulting. 2 weeks' pay and a non-disclosure agreement that basically meant I couldn't tell the truth about what happened. Mark had been thorough. When I reached out to my network, I discovered he'd already poisoned the well. Difficult to work with, the whispers said. Emotional. Couldn't handle the pressure. Every recruiter I'd known suddenly had full rosters. Every contact became mysteriously unavailable. By month 2, I was applying to positions I was overqualified for, then positions I was qualified for, then anything that would pay rent. The rejection emails became a daily ritual of humiliation. We've decided to go with a candidate whose experience better aligns with our needs. Translation: Mark Halston's reach was longer than I'd imagined. That's how I ended up at Murphy's, a small bar in Queens, 40 minutes from my old life in Manhattan. The owner, Danny, didn't care about my resume or my references. He needed someone who could work nights, handle drunk customers, and not steal from the register. I could do all three. The first night I worked the bar, my hands shook as I poured beer, not from nervousness, but from rage. 3 years of graduate school, 8 years climbing the corporate ladder, countless hours perfecting my craft, reduced to remembering who ordered the Bud Light and who wanted the IPA. The tips were cash, though, and cash didn't judge your past. The customers were a mix of construction workers, night shift nurses, and locals who'd been coming there for decades. They didn't know who I used to be, and I didn't tell them. To them, I was just Emily, the new bartender who made strong drinks and didn't chat too much. It was a mercy to be anonymous. But late at night, after closing, when I'd count the register and wipe down the bar, Mark's words would echo in my head. You were never quite good enough to play at this level anyway. The worst part was that I'd started to believe him. Maybe I wasn't cut out for it. Maybe I'd been pretending all along. The confidence I'd spent years building had crumbled in a single afternoon. I started drinking after my shifts. Nothing dramatic, just enough whiskey to blur the edges of my thoughts, to make the walk back to my studio apartment bearable. The apartment itself was a constant reminder of my fall. I'd given up my 2-bedroom in the Upper West Side for this cramped space with a radiator that clanged all night and a view of a brick wall. My mother called weekly, her voice careful and concerned. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, she'd say. Maybe it's time to come home, regroup. Home meant admitting defeat. Home meant proving Mark right, that I couldn't hack it in the big leagues. The lowest point came on a rainy Tuesday night. A group of finance bros stumbled into Murphy's, already drunk from some corporate happy hour. They were loud, obnoxious, and wearing suits that cost more than I now made in a month. One of them looked familiar, Thompson, or Thomas, something like that. He'd been an intern at Grantwell when I was there. He squinted at me as I took their order. Hey, don't I know you? You look really familiar. I kept my voice steady. I don't think so. But he persisted, that drunk confidence making him bold. No. Wait, I definitely... Holy shit, you're Emily Carter. You used to work at Grantwell. You were like, a big deal there. The entire bar seemed to go quiet. His friends looked between us, sensing drama. What happened to you? He asked, genuinely bewildered. Why are you... He gestured at the bar, at my stained apron, at my entire existence. I could have told him the truth, could have exposed Mark's games right there. Instead, I poured their drinks with steady hands and said, That'll be $36. They left a $5 tip on a $100 tab. Thompson avoided eye contact the rest of the night. After they left, I stood in the bar's small bathroom, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back was a stranger, hollow eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. This wasn't just about losing a job anymore. This was about losing myself. But somewhere beneath the humiliation and self-doubt, that ember of anger still glowed. Mark Halston had tried to erase me, to reduce me to nothing. And he'd almost succeeded. Almost. But I was still here, still breathing, still refusing to disappear completely. I didn't know how yet. But I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the dark chapter before the comeback. That night, I stopped drinking whiskey after my shift. If I was going to rise from these ashes, I'd need to be sharp. I'd need to remember everything, every slight, every humiliation, every lesson this fall was teaching me. Because when the opportunity came, and somehow I knew it would, I'd be ready. It was a Thursday night, 6 months into my bartending exile, when everything changed. The bar was quieter than usual, just a handful of regulars nursing their drinks. I was wiping down glasses, lost in the mindless rhythm of the work. When a woman in an expensive coat walked in, she looked out of place, too polished for Murphy's, like a swan in a duck pond. She sat at the bar, ordered a gin and tonic, and studied me with curious eyes. There was something familiar about her, but I couldn't place it. Then she smiled. "Emily Carter," she said. It wasn't a question. My stomach dropped. Another person from my past come to witness my humiliation. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "Patricia Reeves. We worked together on the Morrison acquisition 2 years ago. You probably don't remember. I was on the client side, sitting in the back during most meetings. But I remember you. You saved that deal when everyone else said it was impossible." The Morrison acquisition. I'd restructured their entire debt portfolio in 72 hours when their original consultant had a nervous breakdown. It felt like a lifetime ago. "That was a long time ago," I said carefully, placing her drink on the bar. Patricia took a sip, her eyes never leaving mine. "I heard what happened at Grantwell. Mark Halston's version, anyway. Corporate politics at its ugliest." She paused. "I also know it was bullshit." Something in my chest loosened, just slightly. It was the first time anyone from that world had said it out loud. "I'm actually glad I found you," she continued. "I've been looking for you for weeks. Your LinkedIn was deleted, your phone disconnected. I had to call in some favors to track you down." "Why?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Because I'm now Chief Operations Officer at Silverpoint Strategies. And we need someone exactly like you." Silverpoint, I knew the name. Everyone in consulting did. They were Grantwell's biggest competitor, the firm that consistently went head-to-head with them for major contracts. They were also known for being ruthless, aggressive, and utterly brilliant. "I appreciate the thought," I said, already building walls. "But I'm not exactly in fighting shape these days." Patricia laughed. "You're serving drinks in Queens after being blackballed by one of the most vindictive assholes in the industry. The fact that you're still standing tells me everything I need to know about your fighting shape." She pulled out a business card, expensive stock, minimalist design. "We're about to enter a bidding war for several major contracts. Grantwell is our primary competition. We need someone who knows their playbook, their weaknesses, their pressure points." She slid the card across the bar. "We need someone with motivation." My hand hesitated over the card. "You want me because I have inside information on Grantwell?" "I want you because you're brilliant," Patricia corrected. "The inside knowledge is just a bonus. But yes, I won't lie. The fact that Mark Halston tried to destroy you makes you particularly interesting to us. Enemy of my enemy and all that. This sounds like you're recruiting me for corporate warfare. Aren't all business deals warfare?" Patricia finished her drink and stood. "The difference is, at Silverpoint, we're honest about it. We don't pretend it's a family while stabbing each other in the back. We're clear about what we are, killers in expensive suits." She dropped a $100 bill on the bar. "Think about it. But not for too long. The first battle starts in 3 weeks, and I need my weapons sharp." After she left, I held the card up to the dim bar light. Patricia Reeves, Chief Operations Officer, Silverpoint Strategies. At the bottom, She'd written her personal cell in pen. Real ink, not printed. A sign of genuine interest. Danny noticed me staring at the card when he came to collect the cash. Job offer? Maybe. Good job or great job? I thought about it. Revenge job? He whistled low. Those are the best kind. Just remember, revenge is a dish best served cold, but it still needs to be served. That night, I walked home with the card in my pocket, feeling its edges through the fabric. For 6 months, I'd been in survival mode, just trying to make it through each day. But Patricia had offered something different, not just a way back into the game, but a chance to flip the entire board. I thought about Mark, probably sitting in his corner office right now, secure in his victory. He thought he'd buried me so deep I'd never crawl out. He had no idea that his biggest competitor had just handed me a shovel and a map to his weaknesses. The next morning, I called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. I'm interested, I said, but I have conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Come to our offices tomorrow, 2 o'clock. We'll discuss terms. Patricia, I said before she could hang up. Why are you really doing this? Corporate rivalry aside. There was a pause. Because 5 years ago, someone did to me what Mark did to you. Different company, same playbook. I didn't get the chance to fight back. Consider this me paying it forward. The next day, I put on my last good suit, the one I'd kept wrapped in plastic in the back of my closet. A relic from my former life. Looking in the mirror, I saw a glimpse of who I used to be. No, who I still was. Just dormant. Waiting. The seed of revenge had been planted. Now it was time to water it with purpose and watch it grow into something beautiful and terrible. The Silver Point offices occupied the top 10 floors of a black glass tower in Midtown. A deliberate stone's throw from Grantwell's building, where Grantwell favored old money mahogany and leather. Silver Point was all sharp edges and modern minimalism, steel, glass, and ambition given architectural form. My official title was Senior Strategic Advisor, a carefully chosen position that gave me authority without triggering the non-compete clause Mark had forced me to sign. The salary was 20% higher than what I'd made at Grantwell, but money wasn't what made my hands steady as I signed the contract. It was the promise of what was to come. Your first assignment, Patricia said on my first day, sliding a folder across her desk, is the Harbinger Tech merger. Grantwell's competing for the advisory role. Mark Halston is leading their team. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. When's the pitch? 6 weeks. We need a strategy that doesn't just win. It needs to humiliate them. She leaned back in her chair. I assume that won't be a problem. No problem at all. The Silver Point culture was exactly as Patricia had advertised, brutal but honest. No one pretended to be friends. Alliances were temporary and transactional. It should have been suffocating. But after Grantwell's false warmth, the transparency was refreshing. Here, knives were carried openly, not hidden behind smiles. My team consisted of 5 analysts, all sharp, all hungry, none of them interested in my past beyond how it could help them win. The lead analyst, James Park, was particularly ruthless. A Princeton grad who analyzed competitors like a surgeon studying anatomy, looking for the vital organs. I pulled Grantwell's last 5 merger proposals, James said during our first meeting, spreading documents across the conference table. There's a pattern. They always overpromise on synergies and underdeliver on integration costs. That's Mark's signature move, I said, recognizing the strategy. Promise the moon during the pitch, then blame market conditions when reality hits. You know his playbook? James asked, his interest sharpening. I know every play he's ever run and most he hasn't thought of yet. The room shifted, a predatory energy filling the space. They smelled blood in the water. Over the next 3 weeks, I dissected every aspect of Mark's approach. I knew his preferred financial models, his go-to market comparisons, even his favorite PowerPoint transitions. More importantly, I knew his weaknesses, his tendency to overlook regulatory issues, his habit of underestimating integration timelines, His fatal flaw of believing his own hype. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed to build something better. I worked 18-hour days, not because anyone demanded it, but because every slide, every projection, every strategic recommendation was a bullet aimed at Mark's career. My apartment became a war room. Walls covered with competitive analysis, financial models, and market research. The strategy I developed was surgical in its precision. Where Mark would propose a traditional merger, I recommended a staged acquisition that reduced risk. Where he'd focus on cost savings, I emphasized revenue growth. Every strength in our proposal highlighted a corresponding weakness in what I knew his would be. "This is vicious," James said admiringly, reviewing my final presentation. "You're not just countering their moves, you're predicting them and making them look stupid for even suggesting them. That's the point." Patricia reviewed the work with the satisfaction of a general surveying battle plans. "You've included things here that aren't public knowledge, inside information about Grantwell's risk assessment processes." "Nothing that violates my NDA," I said carefully. "Just informed speculation based on publicly observable patterns." She smiled. "Of course. Purely speculation." The night before the pitch, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my apartment window, looking toward the distant lights of the financial district. Somewhere out there, Mark was probably reviewing his presentation, confident in his approach, unaware that I'd already dismantled it piece by piece. I thought about the person I'd been 6 months ago, broken and serving drinks in Queens. That woman had been a victim. The woman I was becoming was something else entirely, not just a survivor, but a predator who'd learned to hunt from being prey. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Tomorrow, we go to war. Get some sleep." But sleep was impossible. Tomorrow would be the first real test, the first direct confrontation since my humiliation. I'd either prove that I belonged back in this world or confirm Mark's assessment that I'd never been good enough. I pulled out the Harbinger files one more time. Not because I needed to review them, I had every number memorized, but because each page was a reminder of what I was fighting for. Not just a job or a contract, but redemption. Proof that Mark Halston had made the biggest mistake of his career when he underestimated me. The best part? He wouldn't even see me coming. Silver Point's pitch team would present my work, my strategy, my surgical dissection of his proposals. I'd be the ghost in the machine, invisible but devastating. By the time he realized what had happened, it would be too late. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about teaching Mark Halston a lesson he'd never forget. Some people aren't just built for the big leagues, they're built to own them. The first call came on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks into my time at Silver Point. I was reviewing financial models when my personal phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Emily, it's David Winters. From Grantwell." David. He'd been on my team before Mark had him transferred. Good analyst, better person, one of the few who'd looked uncomfortable when I was escorted out. "David," I said carefully, "this is unexpected. I heard you landed at Silver Point." His voice was low, like he was afraid of being overheard. "Look, I can't talk long, but things here, they're not good. Mark's getting worse. Last week, he fired 3 people from the Chicago office just to make his numbers look better." "Why are you telling me this?" There was a pause. "Because what he did to you was wrong. And because I think you should know he's doing it to others." That was the first crack in the dam. Within days, my phone became a confessional for Grantwell's walking wounded. Sarah Martinez called next. Mark had stolen credit for her predictive model, then demoted her when she complained. Then came Robert Liu, forced out after questioning Mark's inflation of client satisfaction scores. Each story was a variation on a theme. Mark Halston climbing higher on the backs of those he destroyed. "We call ourselves the Graveyard Shift," Sarah told me during a clandestine coffee meeting in Brooklyn. "All the careers Mark killed. There are a dozen of us now, maybe more." "What do you want from me?" I asked, though I already knew. "Justice," She said simply, "We know you're at Silver Point. We know you're competing against him. We want to help." It was Robert who provided the first real intelligence. "Mark's been cooking the books on the Steinberg account," he said over encrypted message. "Billing for hours never worked. Inflating expense reports. I have copies of the original timesheets." "That's fraud," I said. "That's Mark." I was careful about how I used the information. Nothing that could be traced back to them, nothing that violated legal boundaries. But patterns began to emerge. Systematic overbilling, suspicious timing on contract modifications, a shell game with subsidiary finances that bordered on money laundering. James noticed my sudden wealth of competitive intelligence. "Your sources are remarkably well-informed," he said, reviewing my latest analysis. "I inspire loyalty," I replied. "Or revenge," he countered with a knowing smile. The network grew organically. Former Grantwell employees who'd found jobs elsewhere but remembered the humiliation. Current employees who were documenting everything, waiting for their chance. Even a few clients who'd noticed discrepancies but hadn't known what to do about them. The most valuable contact came through David, a junior analyst named Marcus who still worked directly under Mark. "He trusts me," Marcus explained during our first meeting in a diner in New Jersey. "Thinks I'm too stupid to understand what I'm seeing. But I understand everything, every falsified report, every manipulated metric." "Why help me?" I asked. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me a photo of a young woman. "My sister, recent MBA grad. Mark interviewed her last month, then spread rumors she was unstable when she turned down his after-hours mentorship. She can't get hired anywhere now." The picture became clearer with each conversation. Mark wasn't just ambitious, he was pathological. His success was built on a foundation of destroyed careers and silenced voices. We weren't just former employees, we were witnesses to a pattern of corporate abuse that had gone unchecked for years. "We need to be strategic," I told Sarah during one of our meetings. "Random leaks won't work. It needs to be coordinated, timed for maximum impact." "The North Harbor power deal," she said immediately. "That's his white whale, $100 million contract. Would guarantee his promotion to executive director." I knew about North Harbor. Silver Point was pitching for it too. It would be a direct confrontation, the biggest contract either firm had competed for this year. "When's the pitch?" I asked. 8 weeks. Mark's already bragging about having it locked up. Says his relationship with their CEO is unbeatable. I smiled. Relationships were important, but they crumbled quickly when trust was broken. Over the following weeks, my network became a silent army. They fed me information about Grantwell's proposal, their strategy, their weaknesses. Nothing illegal, just observations from people who happened to overhear conversations, notice patterns, remember details. Marcus was particularly valuable. Mark's entire strategy hinges on promising a 30% cost reduction in the first year, he reported. But the math doesn't work. He's hiding assumptions that would fall apart under scrutiny. Can you document that? Already have. Saved every draft, every email where he told me to adjust the numbers. Patricia noticed my increasing confidence. "You seem energized lately," she observed. "I am." "The North Harbor pitch. I want to lead it." She raised an eyebrow. "That would put you directly against Mark Halston." "Yes, it would." "The presentation is in person. He'll see you." "I'm counting on it." Patricia studied me for a long moment. "You're not just trying to win this, are you? You're trying to destroy him." "I'm trying to give him exactly what he deserves," I said evenly. "Nothing more, nothing less." She nodded slowly. "Then you'll lead the pitch. Make it devastating." That night, I messaged my network. "The North Harbor pitch is our moment. Everything we've gathered, everything we know, it all leads to this." The responses came quickly, a chorus of people who'd been waiting for this chance. We weren't just planning to beat Mark Halston. We were going to expose him in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. The graveyard shift was about to rise. The North Harbor Power boardroom was on the 52nd floor. with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. I arrived 40 minutes early with my team, claiming the presentation room to set up our materials. My hands were steady as I arranged the folders, but my heart was racing. In 20 minutes, I would face Mark Halston for the first time since he destroyed my career. When the Grantwell team arrived, Mark entered first, all swagger and expensive cologne. He was mid-conversation with his senior analyst when he saw me. The words died in his throat. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, then a slow, creeping rage that he tried to mask with his trademark smile. "Emily," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "What a surprise. I didn't realize Silver Point was bringing in freelancers." "Senior strategic advisor, actually," I corrected, matching his tone. "Full-time, corner office, you know how it is." His jaw tightened. "Indeed." The North Harbor executives filed in: CEO William Chen, CFO Janet Ross, and 3 board members. William Chen was known for his poker face, but I caught him glancing between Mark and me, sensing the tension. "Gentlemen, ladies," Chen said, taking his seat. "We're looking forward to both presentations. Grantwell, you're first." Mark's presentation was exactly what I'd expected. Bold promises, aggressive cost reductions, timelines that would require miracles. He spoke with his usual confidence, selling the sizzle while hiding the absence of steak. His team nodded along, well-trained puppets in expensive suits. "We project 30% cost savings in year 1, Mark declared, clicking to a slide filled with manipulated numbers. "Our proprietary methodology has never failed to deliver." I made notes, catching every inflated claim, every hidden assumption. James, sitting beside me, whispered, "He's hanging himself." "Not yet," I whispered back. "But soon." When Mark finished, Chen turned to us. "Silver Point? Ms. Carter, I believe you're presenting." I stood, smoothing my jacket. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Before we begin our proposal, I'd like to address something critical: the real cost of transformation." Click. My first slide showed a comparison chart. When firms promise 30% cost savings in year 1, they're often hiding critical assumptions. I clicked again, revealing a detailed breakdown. For instance, these projections typically assume 0 integration delays, no regulatory hurdles, and perfect stakeholder adoption. In reality, based on documented case studies, such aggressive targets lead to corner cutting that damages long-term value. Mark's face was reddening. "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said calmly. "It's pattern recognition. Would you like me to walk through specific examples from the public record?" Chen raised a hand. "Continue with your proposal, Ms. Carter." For the next 40 minutes, I systematically presented our strategy while subtly dismantling every pillar of Mark's proposal. Where he promised speed, I demonstrated how rushed implementations had failed at similar companies. Where he claimed cost savings, I showed hidden expenses he'd conveniently ignored. "Our approach is different," I explained. "We promise realistic 20% savings in year 1, but with sustainable practices that compound over time. By year 3, you'll have saved more than the aggressive approach without the operational trauma." "Interesting," Ross said. "You seem very familiar with potential pitfalls, almost like you've seen these mistakes made before." I met her gaze directly. "I've spent my career studying what works and what doesn't. Experience is the best teacher, especially when it's experience with failure, either your own or observed in others." Mark couldn't contain himself. "This is ridiculous. Silver Point is clearly trying to undermine our proposal with scare tactics." "Actually," Chen interrupted, pulling out a tablet, "I'm curious about something, Mr. Halston. These cost projections you've shown, they're remarkably similar to what you promised Brennan Industries last year. How did that work out?" Mark froze. The Brennan deal had been a disaster, though Grantwell had managed to keep it quiet. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." 28% over budget, 14 months behind schedule." Chen read from his tablet. "According to my sources, Would you like to explain why North Harbor should expect different results? I knew then that Marcus had done more than just feed me information. Someone had been talking directly to Chen. Mark's composure finally cracked. This is clearly a coordinated attack. Emily has a personal vendetta. Mr. Halston. Chen's voice was ice. Are you suggesting Ms. Carter fabricated Brennan Industries' results? Or that she somehow influenced your firm's past performance? The room went silent. Mark's team looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. One of them, Thompson, the one who'd recognized me at the bar, actually looked satisfied. Perhaps. Chen continued. We should discuss something else interesting. 3 former Grantwell employees have reached out to us in the past week, expressing concerns about billing practices on your current contracts. Would you care to address that? Mark stood abruptly. This is unprofessional. We're leaving. Sit down, Mr. Halston, Chen commanded. We're not finished. But Mark was already heading for the door, his team scrambling to follow. As he passed me, he hissed, This isn't over. You're right, I said quietly. It's just beginning. After they left, Chen turned to us. Well, that was illuminating. Ms. Carter, your proposal is compelling. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. As we packed up, Ross approached me. That was brutal, she said. Effective, but brutal. Sometimes the truth is brutal, I replied. Indeed. You know, we did our homework on you. We know what happened at Grantwell. Mark Halston made an enemy of the wrong person. I met her gaze. He made enemies of many people. I just happened to be in a position to do something about it. 2 days later, Patricia called me into her office. North Harbor is ours, 100 million over 3 years. She poured 2 glasses of champagne. Also, interesting news from Grantwell. Mark Halston is under internal investigation. Seems someone leaked documentation of systematic overbilling to their board. I kept my expression neutral. How unfortunate for him. Patricia smiled. Yes. Quite unfortunate. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I've been focused on winning the North Harbor contract, I said evenly. Anything else is just karma. To karma, then. Patricia toasted. As I raised my glass, I thought about Mark, probably in emergency meetings, trying to explain the unexplainable, watching his carefully constructed empire crumble. He'd been right about one thing. It wasn't over. But he'd been wrong about everything else, especially about me. I wasn't just good enough for the big leagues. I was rewriting the rules of the game. The news broke on a Thursday morning. I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections when James burst in, laptop in hand, grinning like he'd won the lottery. You need to see this, he said, turning the screen toward me. The Wall Street Journal headline read, Grantwell & Co., Senior Director under SEC Investigation for Financial Irregularities. Below it, Mark Halston's corporate headshot stared back at me, that confident smile now ironic. It gets better. James scrolled down. They're investigating 3 years of contracts. Apparently, someone provided detailed documentation of fraudulent billing practices to both the SEC and Grantwell's board. They're calling it one of the most comprehensive whistleblower packages they've ever received. I kept my expression carefully neutral. That's quite a development. Patricia appeared in my doorway. Conference room. Now. The whole team needs to see this. The atmosphere in the conference room was electric. Someone had already pulled up multiple news sources on the main screen. The Financial Times, Bloomberg, Reuters, all running variations of the same story. Mark Halston's spectacular fall from grace. Listen to this. Patricia read from her phone. Sources within Grantwell confirm that the investigation has uncovered systematic overbilling, totaling potentially millions of dollars. The board has placed Halston on immediate administrative leave pending further investigation. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Martinez. Check your email. I discreetly opened it on my phone. She'd forwarded an internal Grantwell memo. Emergency all-hands meeting. Damage control. The CEO himself was flying in from London. Another message, this one from Marcus. He's in the building, cleaning out his office. Security is watching him. It's beautiful. Emily, Patricia said, drawing my attention back. You're remarkably quiet for someone watching their former tormentor implode. I'm processing, I said simply. I bet you are. She studied me with knowing eyes. You know, it's interesting timing. Right after he lost the North Harbor contract. His whole world falls apart. Almost like someone was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The universe has a sense of justice sometimes, I offered. The universe had help, Patricia countered. Very well orchestrated help. That afternoon, more details emerged. The whistleblower package hadn't just included financial documents. There were emails where Mark explicitly instructed subordinates to falsify timesheets, voice recordings of him bragging about overcharging clients, a pattern of behavior so egregious that Grantwell had no choice but to act decisively. Robert Liu called me during lunch. Did you see the part about the discrimination complaints? 12 former employees have come forward. HR buried them all, but now they're part of the SEC investigation. 12? I knew about 7. People are brave when they smell blood in the water. Everyone he ever stepped on is coming forward. By evening, it was clear Mark's career was over, not just at Grantwell, but everywhere. The SEC investigation would likely lead to criminal charges. His professional licenses would be revoked. The man who'd once told me I wasn't good enough for the big leagues was about to be permanently banned from the game. I stayed late that night, standing at my office window, looking out at the city lights. My reflection in the glass showed a woman I barely recognized, confident, powerful, vindicated. My phone rang. Unknown number. Emily. Mark's voice was raw, stripped of its usual arrogance. I know it was you. Mark, I said calmly. I heard about your troubles. How unfortunate. Don't play games. The whistleblower package, the timing, the way everything was coordinated, it has your fingerprints all over it. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? We both know what you did. What I know, I said, is that you built your career on the backs of people you destroyed. You thought we'd all just disappear, fade away into nothing. But we didn't. We remembered everything. This is revenge. No, I corrected. Revenge would have been destroying you the way you destroyed me, with lies and manipulation. This is justice. Every document in that package is real. Every crime you're being investigated for. You actually committed. I didn't frame you. Mark, I just made sure everyone could see who you really are. There was silence on the line. You know what the ironic part is? I continued. If you'd just let me leave quietly, if you hadn't needed to humiliate me, none of this would have happened. Your cruelty created your own downfall. I'll fight this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. With what? The lawyers Grantwell is no longer paying for? The connections who are all distancing themselves from you? The reputation you just lost on every major financial news outlet? You've destroyed my life. No. Mark, you destroyed your life the moment you decided stepping on others was the way to climb higher. I just made sure you couldn't do it anymore. I hung up. There was nothing more to say. The next morning, Grantwell announced Mark's termination, effective immediately, and promised full cooperation with all investigations. They also announced a comprehensive review of their billing practices and a new ethics oversight committee. David Winters sent me a single text. The Wicked Witch is dead. Marcus was more poetic. The graveyard shift sends its regards. But it was Sarah's message that hit deepest. We're free, all of us. Thank you. I stared at those words for a long time. Freedom. That's what this had really been about. Not just my freedom from the shadow of what Mark had done to me, but freedom for everyone he'd hurt. Everyone he'd silenced. Everyone he'd stepped on. The ember of anger that had sustained me for months finally went out, replaced by something else. Not satisfaction exactly, but peace. The scales were balanced. The debt was paid. Patricia knocked on my door. There's champagne in the conference room. The team wants to celebrate our North Harbor win. I'll be right there, I said. As I gathered my things, I took one last look at the news article on my screen. Mark Halston's corporate headshot stared back at me, frozen in time at the height of his power, unaware of how far he was about to fall. You were wrong about one thing, Mark, I said quietly to the image. I wasn't just good enough for the big leagues. I was good enough to change the rules entirely. 6 months later, I stood in front of the Grantwell building one last time. Not as a former employee, not as a competitor, but as myself, Emily Carter, whole and vindicated. The company had invited me to speak at their new ethics summit, part of their image rehabilitation after the Mark Halston scandal. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd declined the invitation, of course. But I wanted to see the building once more, to close this chapter properly. Thought I might find you here, Patricia said, appearing beside me. Big news today. Oh. Mark's trial date was set. Federal prosecutors are pushing for 5 to 7 years. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. His lawyers are trying to plea bargain. But the SEC wants to make an example of him. I nodded, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just nothing. Mark Halston had become irrelevant to my life. You know what the real victory is? Patricia continued. The 12 people who came forward about discrimination, they're all getting settlements. Grantwell created a victim fund. $20 million. That's good, I said, and meant it. They deserve that. You could have gotten a settlement too. Wrongful termination suit would have been a slam dunk after everything that came out. I got something better, I said. I got to prove him wrong. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the morning rush of workers entering the building. Young analysts with eager faces, senior managers with their coffee and confidence, all of them part of a machine that had once chewed me up and spit me out. Any regrets? Patricia asked. I thought about it. No. Every step, every humiliation, every night serving drinks in Queens, it all led to this, to who I am now. And who's that? Someone who knows her worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion. Someone who understands that power isn't about stepping on others. It's about lifting yourself up despite being stepped on. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Martinez. Just got promoted to director at my new firm. They said my experience standing up to corporate corruption showed leadership. Thank you, Emily. Then another from David. Leading my own team now. Grantwell's new management promoted all of us who spoke up. And Marcus. Starting at Columbia Business School this fall, scholarship essay was about moral courage in corporate America. Guess who I wrote about? The ripples, I murmured. Sorry? The ripples, I repeated, showing Patricia the messages. I thought this was just about Mark and me, but it became bigger. All these people who found their courage, who refused to be victims anymore. That's the real victory. Patricia smiled. You didn't just get revenge, Emily. You started a revolution. As we walked away from the Grantwell building, I caught my reflection in a window. The woman looking back wasn't the eager young analyst who'd entered that building years ago, nor the broken bartender who'd been forced to leave it. She was something new, forged in the fire of humiliation and reborn through determination. So what's next? Patricia asked. You've slain your dragon. What does the hero do after the quest is over? The hero realizes it was never about slaying the dragon, I said. It was about becoming someone who could. That evening, I had dinner with my mother, who'd flown in from Ohio. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Not for the revenge, though Lord knows he deserved it, but for surviving. For not letting it break you. It almost did, I admitted. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, she said, her Midwest wisdom shining through. You're here. You won. That's what matters. Later. Alone in my apartment. My new apartment. A 2-bedroom in Tribeca with actual sunlight and no clanging radiator. I pulled out a box I'd kept from my Murphy's Bar days. Inside was the apron I'd worn, still stained with beer and whiskey. A reminder of my lowest point. I thought about throwing it away, but didn't. Some reminders are worth keeping. My laptop chimed with an email from William Chen at North Harbor Power. Emily, just wanted you to know our partnership with Silver Point has exceeded all projections. Your strategic vision has saved us millions. Also, heard through the grapevine about your history with Halston. Takes real character to maintain such professionalism given the circumstances. If you ever want to come in-house, we have a C-suite position waiting. A C-suite position? 3 years ago, that had been my ultimate dream. Now it was just one option among many. I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mark Halston was probably meeting with his lawyers, desperately trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. But I didn't think about him anymore. That chapter was closed. The woman who'd walked out of Grantwell with a banker's box and shattered confidence was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that true power comes not from crushing others, but from refusing to stay crushed. Someone who knew that revenge, served cold and precisely, could be a form of justice. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the best response to, "You're not good enough," is not words, but undeniable proof to the contrary. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Ms. Carter? This is Amanda Richardson from Forbes. We're doing a feature on women who've transformed corporate crisis into triumph. We'd love to interview you about your journey from Grantwell to Silver Point. I smiled. I'd be happy to share my story. Because that's what it had become. Not just a tale of revenge, but a story of resilience. And maybe, just maybe, someone else sitting in a bar somewhere, broken and humiliated, would read it and remember that rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the foundation for the comeback. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation in your workplace? How did you handle it? Your experiences matter, and I'd love to hear them. Until next time, remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's opinion of you.